Xiaolin Showdown was a really cool show about 4 Shaolin monks using these magical talismans to fight evil. Kinda like that other Kids WB show where Jackie Chan fought evil using magical talismans. The bread and butter of this show is obviously the Xiaolin Showdowns, in which 2 or more characters face off, wagering these talismans called Shengon Wu. Now, I didn't really watch Xiaolin Showdown much growing up. My first exposure to it was when my best friend was over my house, and we both instinctively reached for the remote at the same time. And as we both grabbed it, he looks me dead in the eyes and says, Xiaolin Showdown. And I gotta say, that moment altered my life forever. Because I don't even think he liked the show, but I gotta say, it's surprisingly great. One of my biggest motivations to make this video was not only because of how creative and surprisingly good I think it is, but also because the main characters lose a lot, as we'll see. So I've put together a list of who wins and loses the most in Xiaolin Showdown. So let's jump into episode 1, I'll fill you in on what you need to know as we go along. Episode 1. The show starts by introducing us to our 4 main characters, the 4 Shaolin monk apprentices of the elements of air, water, earth, and fire. We have Raimundo, the kinda laid-back, cocky surfer from Brazil, Clay, the quiet yet clever cowboy, who I would assume is from Texas, Kimiko, the hot-headed yet caring technology whiz from Japan, and Omi, the skilled and cocky yet out-of-touch water element user who was already living here at the Shaolin Temple when the show started. Now there's 2 questions that might jump out to you right away. The first might be why Kimiko is in a USA outfit with blonde hair if she's from Japan. Well, I can't answer why she does this, but every episode she seems to change her outfit, which is pretty cool. I love when shows change their outfits, like The Weekenders for instance. It's just a nice touch and detail. It is funny they introduce her like this though, like they couldn't have waited until after introductions to change her style or make her almost unrecognizable. The second question you might have is why Omi is yellow. And all I can really say to that is that Christy Hui, the creator of the show, is a Chinese woman, so I've heard theories that maybe he's supposed to be golden, like as some kind of visual enlightenment. But realistically, I think it's possible, if not probable, that they wanted to make this crazy spherical kid with elemental powers stand out. Like he's basically a yellow pinball that flips all around, and airing on Kids WB with some of the most iconic mascots like Pikachu or the Ninja Turtles. Maybe they thought making him yellow is just a fun little way to make him an icon or a mascot, kinda like how the Simpsons are yellow so they stand out. I've read through archives and articles all the way from the 2010s even back to 2008 where people discussed if Xiaolin Showdown was prejudiced or offensive or racist, which some people might have a hard time believing. These discussions have been around for so long, but I think it's important to note most people had no issue with the relatively surface level stereotypes in the show because the characters have a lot of depth to them. For example, Clay is a big cowboy and sometimes talks in Western euphemisms, but he's also extremely clever, using his brain as much as his brawn. Or Kimiko is a technology whiz from Japan, but embodies her element of fire with her hot-headed personality, while also being kinda motherly to Omi. So I think the big takeaway is whether Xiaolin Showdown has stereotypes or not, the characters are written with care and depth, ultimately superseding most complaints. So the first episode moves at a really fast pace, with us meeting the antagonist Jack Spicer, who wastes no time sharing his motives.
I want to rule the whole world! All of it! Not some of it, not just Iceland or Fiji. I want to rule the whole world!
He opens a gift from his dad, which is a box containing the ancient evil spirit Wuya, which begs the question, did his dad know there was an evil spirit in there? Did he just think it was a random box he never opened and decided to give his son? Also, Jack Spicer may be named after the poet Jack Spicer, who was associated with the San Francisco Renaissance of the 1950s. I don't think there's any correlation, like Jack isn't very poetic or graceful or anything, but it is a pretty cool name, I gotta admit. The episode rapid fires the Shengon Wu at us when the dragon of the temple Dojo gets a premonition of the mantis flip coin, a Shengon Wu which gives the user the ability to leap and flip like a mantis. Jack Spicer already has the Shengon Wu by the time the gang arrives, and when asked to give this talisman back to the warriors, Jack sends a horde of robots to attack the group. The robots are pretty ingenious because they allow the heroes to use these crazy superpowers without worrying about the logistics of really hurting or killing anyone. Like they can just summon tsunamis at will. But oh, it can take out 8 robots. That's kind of a good measuring unit for strength in this show, sometimes. We see the groups pretty uncoordinated, tripping and bumping into each other, throwing robots at each other, and Jack runs off with the mantis flip coin, so I'll count this as a win for Jack, and the first win of the show so far. Before they can even reflect on this loss, another Shengon Wu shows up, the 2-ton tunic, which gives you armor in the form of a 2-ton tunic. Jack grabs this talisman too, but he's punched out by Clay and Raimundo and just eerily floats away in a boat. The first time I saw this, I thought this was some kind of trick, like Jack made a robot of himself or something, cause when we see him silently float off face down in a boat down the river, it looks like he's dead. But yeah, I'll count this as a win for Clay and Raimundo, but not Omi and Kimiko. So the show does a good job of quickly giving both sides their own Shengon Wu, cause this is where we get to the Xiaolin Showdown, in which Omi and Jack both grab the next Shengon Wu, the Eye of Dashi, at the same time. They wager the Mantis Flip Coin versus the 2-ton Tunic in this showdown, where they compete in a race along these stepping stones. It's so creative how they incorporate and exaggerate their settings for the showdown, like this field was so peaceful, and then they take these stepping stones and turn them into huge pillars. The 2 Shengon Wu being used are also kinda random, like one that makes you flip versus one that gives you heavy armor. But part of why I think it works really well for the first showdown is because of how visually distinct these powers are. Like if you just walked into the room and you're only seeing the showdown, you could probably piece together this is a race between 2 people, one with flipping powers and one with heavy armor. And it kind of plays out like a tortoise and the hare story, where Omi takes advantage of his slow, heavy armor by riding one of Jack's robots towards the finish line, pantsing the overconfident Jack along the way. Omi not only wins the contested Eye of Dashi, but the wagered Mantis Flip Coin too. The episode ends with Omi learning the other characters aren't here as his new students, but as his equals as they train to become Xiaolin apprentices. So yeah, it's a really fast-paced first episode that manages to do a lot in a little amount of time, and while future episodes will focus more on character development, I gotta commend how efficiently this established the setting, plot, main characters, and 3 different fights for Shengon Wu, including a Xiaolin Showdown. So let's move on to episode 2. So the next few episodes slow down a little more and focus on different characters and their development. The episode starts with the monks' training, in which they race through an obstacle course. Omi has a great time, but Clay beats him by just turning around and grabbing the goal. You know Clay's a PlayStation fan, cause he just turned 360 degrees and walked away. Jack is in France for some reason, and there's this mime with telekinetic mime powers that messes with him for some reason. But Jack teams up with this evil mime, and they end up putting Omi, Rai, and Kimiko in an invisible box they can't escape from. I guess I should count this as a win for the mime, but I'm not gonna make assets for this one-off character.
I'm doing it! Yeah!
Yeah.
Some of these, and some of these. Almost there, and done.
Clay realizes all his friends are stuck in the box and get into a fight with the mime, and it plays out kinda like a JoJo fight where the mime copies all of Clay's movements. Clay defeats the mime by punching himself in the face, which knocks out the mime when he copies this. Now this is funny and all, but if Clay is stronger than the mime, wouldn't this have done way more damage to Clay than it would the mime? Does the mime recreate the punch with the same speed and force? Is Clay's face just sturdier? I don't know, I feel like I usually see the smaller characters defeat the bigger characters by doing this. After Clay outwits the mime, he gets into a showdown with Jack, where they compete to catch a robin. We see Jack frantically fly around, chasing the robin, while Clay calmly picks sunflower seeds. It's ultimately revealed Clay was picking these seeds to feed the robin, calling back to earlier in the episode how Clay uses his cleverness to win fights and isn't just brute force. This makes him such an interesting character to me, even though this episode didn't really have much development. Like, Clay didn't really have a problem in this episode he needed to overcome. He started off very clever and won through his cleverness, but it does a pretty good job of showing how creative these showdowns can get. Episode 3. This episode starts during the conclusion of a showdown in which Kimiko loses to Jack because of how hot-headed she is. She tries to punch the mountain she and Jack are climbing up, causing her to fall, and I haven't watched Infinity War, but it kinda looks like she's wearing the Infinity Gauntlet here. I hope that's what it's called. And it fades away, kinda like that other thing Thanos does. The boys try to comfort Kimiko, but Omi has such a warped frame of reference of the outside world since he was raised in the monastery, training his whole life. And he has an 11th century guide called the Ancient Guide to Females, and of course they say females. So all the boys kinda harass Kimiko, but Clay said she did as good of a job as she could, not because she's a girl, but because she's such a hothead. And I love this interaction, because not only does it show how out of touch Omi is, or how Clay playfully makes fun of Kimiko, but it also gives Kimiko very real, valid internal and external conflicts in the form of controlling her emotions, and how she deals with sexism and the times where these two things overlap. Later, Kimiko finds the Tangled Web Comb, a Shengon Wu that can activate create these hair-like strings that are pretty difficult to control and require a lot of focus and emotion, which is obviously difficult for her because of how hot-headed and vulnerable Kimiko can be. I guess we can call this a win for Kimiko since she found the Shenganwu, but I wouldn't call it a loss for Jack since he's not here, you know? Kimiko tries to improve her focus and emotions by pouring tea from this giant teapot, but she fails when she sees the boys walk out, reading her diary, eating her lipstick, and messing with her PDA. And if you don't know what a PDA is, it was like a smartphone that could simultaneously do everything and nothing, all in one. Later we're introduced to the villain Cat Nappe, who seems to just be a normal woman who was at a party at Jack's house with his parents, and she got bored and wandered downstairs and decided she'll just become a villain. She's the classic Catwoman archetype and proves to be a pretty formidable ally right away. The gang travels underneath a temple to find the final Shenganwu of the episode, the Golden Tiger Claws, and we get a showdown between Kimiko and Jack. The showdown is a race across this bridge and a volcano, and Jack uses this talisman that's been giving him monkey powers throughout the episode, slowly turning him more and more monkey-like the more he uses it. Kimiko gets tangled in the tangled webcomb yet again, but remembers Master Feng's words to drown out the distractions and quiet the storm of her mind, and ends up using the webcomb properly, stopping Jack and his monkey powers, giving us one of the weirdest, grossest moments in the whole show.
Hey!
Like, why do his monkey feet curl upside down into his feet/shoes? This is so painful and gross and weird. The boys were betting on if Kimiko would win or lose during the showdown, and it turns out Raimundo, who probably made fun of Kimiko the most in this episode, actually bet on her winning and had faith in her the whole time. Which is really sweet, cause like, he messes with everyone, but it's nice to show he cares for and believes in his friends, despite his rebellious attitude. It's the little things, you know? Overall, I really like this episode. I think it goes beyond a lot of episodes that try to tackle sexism by giving Kimiko a valid struggle to deal with in addition to the sexism she faces. So let's move on.
I think it's great you found a calm, Kimiko.
Oh, yes. Accessorizing is within your talents as a female.
Episode 4. The warriors mess around with the Golden Tiger Claws Kimiko won last episode, which have the power to teleport the user. Suddenly a new Shenganwu, the changing chopsticks, appear, and Omi gets into a Xiaolin Showdown with Cat Nappe.
I challenge you! Name please. Cat Nappe. Cat Nappe! I challenge you to a Xiaolin Showdown! Okay.
The showdown is a game of tag in which Cat Nappe steals the Golden Tiger Claws and is really good with them, tagging Omi. Omi's bummed about losing the Tiger Claws, and back at the dojo, Master Feng has a new training session in which he challenges the warriors to take his glass elephant from him. Clay lassos the elephant, and right as he does this, Master Feng smashes the elephant with a hammer, teaching the students the complexities and philosophies of competition. The warriors' goal was to win, but Master Feng's only goal was to not lose. By smashing the elephant, he guaranteed he couldn't lose, therefore winning. Cat Nappe is totally overpowered with the Tiger Claws, robbing them all and pretty handily beating Omi, Kimiko, and Raimundo at the same time. Clay says he won't hit a girl, but let's be real, she would have beat his ass. So I'm counting this as a win for Cat Nappe and a loss for everyone else, including Clay. Cat Nappe continues to wreak havoc, but they're eventually able to restrain her for just a moment for Omi to grab the Tiger Claws. He's surrounded by Jack and his minions, and keeping in mind how powerful Cat Nappe was with the Tiger Claws, Omi rips a portal open and throws the Tiger Claws into the center of the earth. This is such a crazy creative decision, but works really well with the philosophy of the episode. This is one of the only episodes that doesn't end with a showdown, and I think it's really interesting because it embodies a lot of the roots of Xiaolin Showdown, as a show that portrays combat and philosophical lessons through Kung Fu. You can maybe argue Xiaolin Showdown as a modern example of wuxia storytelling, a genre of Chinese fiction which literally translates to martial arts and chivalry. So overall, it's a pretty good episode that focuses on the philosophy of their trainings and really justifies the context of the show as a Shaolin martial arts cartoon. Episode 5. The episode begins with Jack assembling more villains to his team, this time the large round ninja named Tebimura. As they learn about the new Shengon Wu, the Sword of the Storm, Raimundo gets bored and daydreams about surfing. Later, Raimundo comes across the sword but doesn't know how to use it properly and ends up losing. As he sulks, Master Feng reminds him of the importance of knowledge and mindfulness, so Raimundo decides to hit the books and studies up on every Shengon Wu he can. During his studying, the Shroud of Shadows is revealed, and Raimundo and Tebimura get into another showdown, but this time it's a double or nothing where they both use 2 Shengon Wu instead of 1. It's pretty cool because it gives us a lot to speculate on before the showdown even begins, just from seeing what Shengon Wu they use. The showdown rule is the first person to fall into the water loses, but there's also these fish that swap the Shengon Wu each character has. Raimundo shows off his knowledge and wind expertise by combining the Shengon Wu in a way that make him fly, ultimately knocking Tebimura into the water and winning the showdown. Raimundo's always depicted as one of the strongest characters with some of the highest potential despite his kinda edgy personality, and I think this episode is a great testament to that. I really love the direction the series takes, giving all 4 characters their own showdown and episode start, because it just feels like a great way to establish the characters, their skills, and even their strengths and weaknesses. So let's move on and see how the show picks up now that this has all been established. Episode 6. This episode starts with Jack revealing the only Shengon Wu he has left is the changing chopsticks, and he's working on a clone of himself by making himself really tiny. I love the shifts in momentum this show has, like sometimes Jack has almost nothing to his name, like this episode, and he just kinda has to find a way to rough it out. But more importantly, the show creates suspense by never eliminating the possibility that the heroes or villains might win. Like, compared to a show like Pokemon, which I love and all, but like you never actually worry Pikachu is gonna be gone at the end of the episode and they're gonna have to struggle to get him back. The good guys always win at the end, but in Xiaolin Showdown, there's a lot of times the heroes lose, and that's really cool to me. Jack creates a shape-shifting robot that takes the form of Kimiko. I don't know why he chose Kimiko specifically. Nah, he's weird for that. The robot Kimiko beats real Kimiko in a fight, and she gets taken away and put in some electric prison, while robot Kimiko talks to the others like she has a blue check mark next to her name.
So let's grab some Shengon Wu and start training. We only use the Shengon Wu when the master says so. Processing. That is correct.
The helmet of Zheng, a Shengon Wu that allows the user to see out the back of their head, is revealed, and Jack gets into a showdown with Robot Kimiko, which she obviously throws for him. I'm counting this as a loss for Kimiko. Not even Robot Kimiko, real Kimiko, because if she didn't lose to the robot in the first place, none of this would have happened. Omi follows Robot Kimiko around, and she shifts into Master Feng, who Omi confides his doubts of Kimiko to.
Master, I have been plagued by doubts about Kimiko. I think Kimiko is an imposter.
I miss Among Us. Shortly after this, Omi catches the imposter Kimiko stealing Shengon Wu. While this fight is happening, Jack is stealing all the Shengon Wu from under their noses thanks to his small size from the changing chopsticks. Also, while this fight is happening, real Kimiko breaks out of the electric prison she was in by hacking the computer with a Rick-rolling Raimundo. So Kimiko drives through the temple in this hovercraft, ramming the imposter Kimiko into a wall, and the 2 Kimikos fight to convince Omi who the real Kimiko is and who's the fake hedgehog. Omi decides once and for all who's real by basically kicking the head off of one of them. I love this sequence so much, and the little pause of doubt like, oh god, did I just kill my friend, is pretty funny. The episode ends with everything back to normal, except that they've lost just about every Shengon Wu they've saved up to this point, except the Mantis' flip coin, and I think this is one of the coolest parts of the season, if not the whole show. They really dramatically raise the stakes and add a lot of pressure and importance to the show having a continuous plot by putting them in this tough situation. So let's see how they recover. Episode 7. The episode starts with Omi trying to do activities with all 3 friends, playing soccer with Raimundo, video games with Kimiko, and lassoing with Clay. They go well for a little bit, but Omi eventually fails because he spreads himself and his focus too thin trying to do all 3 things at once. A new Shengon Wu appears that just so happens to embody the themes and conflict of this episode, the Ring of the 9 Dragons, which allows the user to make up to 9 clones of their self. Master Feng warns that they're not responsible enough to use use the cloning powers of the 9 dragons, but Omi clones himself anyways, believing that he can practice all the things he wants to now. The Falcon's Eye Shengan Wu reveals itself up in the snowy mountains, and the gang decides to split up, in a way, spreading themselves thin again. Omi splits himself 5 times to further spread out the efforts, but all the Omi clones just mess up things further for everyone else. Hilariously, one of the more loopy Omi clones gets into a showdown with Jack, and just watch how they interact.
Omi, I challenge you to a Xiaolin Showdown.
The showdown is a snowboarding race, and I really love this showdown. Truly one of the coolest, most memorable from this season. Not only because of the cool concept, but the course is really cool and looks great. On top of this, having a loopy Omi hardly survive on a snowboard is really funny and kind of scary, honestly. Loopy Omi actually makes it all the way up to the top of the mountain and ends up winning, is what I would say if he could actually reach his arm. Like, oh my god, reach out your arm and take it. The episode ends with all the Omi clones combining back into one focused Omi, and now that he can focus his efforts, he's a really skilled snowboarder. Omi shreds the mountain and ends up winning the showdown, is what I'd say if Jack didn't grab it first. I actually love that they let Jack win a showdown at the end of an episode, cause up to now we've only seen Jack win early on in episodes and always lose the final showdown. It feels like the writers subvert the expectations that the end of an episode has to let the heroes learn a lesson and win the showdown, but it still works cause it really feels like Omi learns his lesson, but is also punished for going against his commands not to clone himself. I'm a lot more invested knowing anyone can win a final showdown now, not to mention the Shaolin Temple was already severely under-equipped in Shengan Wu, so it's nice to see they're not in such a rush to reverse the fortune of the heroes against Master Feng's. It's always interesting to see the negative aspects of these Shengan Wu, like they're these crazy magical double-edged swords, like you can clone yourself but you'll spread your focus thin, or you can get monkey powers but you'll become more monkey-like. It really makes the proverbs and lessons they learn at the temple all the more important in the context of the episodes and the morals of the show. Episode 8 starts with a showdown inside a volcano, where Jack flies away with Dojo as the only one left who can stop him. Dojo fails pretty hard, shooting a little suit at him, but Oni manages to get in a showdown with Jack and miraculously wins, giving him the Black Dragon. This Shengan Wu is apparently useless, according to Dojo, which the other warriors say is pretty comparable to Dojo, who is also useless. As Kimiko tries researching the Black Dragon, she ends up activating its real power, which freezes her in place, and kind of makes the episode feel like if the movie The Thing had a crossover with Courage the Cowardly Dog, which would go so hard, hold on. Dojo laments about how useless he is, but Clay tries to cheer him up by telling Dojo he's got a fire inside of him, and if he needs help finding his inner sizzle, just take a sip of his family's hot sauce. Clay gets frozen by the dragon as he says this, which jogs their memories that this isn't the Black Dragon, but the Sapphire Dragon, which is a Shengan Wu only to be used as a last resort. It'll turn your enemies into Sapphire statues, along with everyone else. The stakes get increasingly high as we see all the monks of the temple get frozen, leaving only Dojo, Omi, and Raimundo remaining. Raimundo gets frozen, and I assumed Omi would save the day / world, but seeing him get frozen too is a pretty cool touch, because it really raises the stakes, leaving only Dojo left. Despite the horror and zombie elements of this episode, the episode finishes with a western standoff, which is pretty hilarious and a great fusion of genres. Dojo drinks all the hot sauce Clay gave him earlier, and the two dragons get into a final fight more reminiscent of Dragon Ball.
I will not let you destroy my world!
Dojo manages to defeat the Sapphire Dragon, freeing all his friends and saving the world. I really like this episode for the big stakes involved, and I love the elements of horror movies incorporated into the episode. It's pretty nice to get an episode dedicated to Dojo, and it makes him feel a lot more useful and a part of the team, as opposed to the comedic relief vehicle for the heroes. Episode 9. The monks start this episode in New York when the Serpent's Tail Shengan Wu reveals itself. It's always moving, so Omi splits up chasing the talisman by himself and causing chaos as he jumps through traffic on top of cars. I thought the New Yorkers were acting a little too nice for Omi jumping on their cars and stuff, but his interactions with the locals definitely makes up for it.
Cowboy,
Go back to Jersey, you tourist!
I am looking for my... I've got mace! Okay. Oh, nice for you. I have Shingang Wu.
Omi watches these guys playing basketball and ends up getting used as the ball. The guys want to fight Omi, but a boy named Jermaine intervenes, standing up for Omi. Also, is this guy with the orange frog cap supposed to be Parappa the Rapper? Psst. Watch my video on the Parappa the Rapper show after this. Also, subscribe and like and stuff. As the other monks try to find Omi, Dojo transforms into a train, and seeing the inside of the train is disgusting. Like, is this Dojo's organs they're grabbing onto? The serpent's tail reveals itself, and Omi and his new friend Jermaine get into a showdown with Jack and his giant mech, and I really like this showdown. The showdown is a 2-on-2 game of basketball, and takes up a lot bigger part of this episode than usual, but it's pretty cool. Like, they just made a Space Jam episode with magic superpower weapons. And while I think it's a really cool concept, I feel something's just a little lacking. Oftentimes in a good showdown, there's some kind of realization or development the characters will go through. Like, Kimiko remembers her training to drown out distractions and ignore the judgment of others, but here we don't really have much to work with. There's no moral dilemma, so it's just kind of running around in action. But I love sports and animation, so there's nothing wrong with just good, simple fun and action from time to time. Jack jumps out to an early lead, but Omi and Jermaine take advantage of their teamwork, ending with Omi ricocheting from their own backboard full court for a game-winning dunk, which does go pretty crazy. They say goodbye to Jermaine, asking him if he wants to train at the temple with the other monks, but he declines, insisting New York's his home. I love that they extend the offer, and Jermaine has a great character design, like he totally looks like he could be a main character of the show. Personality-wise, he does kind of have a lot of overlap with Raimundo though, like they're both kind of cool and confident, maybe a little cocky, so I'm not too upset he doesn't join when we have a similar character already. Episode 10. This episode starts with Raimundo pulling a prank by pouring milk into Clay's cowboy hat to see if it truly holds 10 gallons. And while it only holds 9.5, Clay chases Raimundo, resulting in a chaotic crash outside the temple. On top of that, Clay's dad is outside because he's concerned about his son and wants to bring him back home. Clay's dad joins the group as they fight for the Orbitornami, and he insists the group forgoes a plan, commanding Clay to just jump in and get the Orbitornami. This clearly doesn't work out with no strategy, and Clay is reluctantly taken away from the temple back to the family ranch. Dojo remembers Clay's dad was wearing a bolo tie that's actually the Shingan Wu, the Star of Hanabi, and the group decides to go to the ranch in order to protect Clay's family in case the Star of Hanabi activates. It's a pretty fun setting, and I love the cowboy outfits and their interactions throughout the episode. Clay's dad says if they're able to take the cows down to the river, he'll pass the Shingan Wu down to Clay, but they end up doing this and nothing changes. It's also hardly seen on screen, like we see Omi fail to get milk from a cow as much as we see the herding of the cows to the river, which was really hyped up as a big deal in the episode. Jack Spicer shows up with his robots and pretty handily takes out Clay's dad. I kinda wish Clay's dad did something cool here, like at least punch out a couple robots before he was defeated or something, maybe to show how cool and respectable he is. Jack ends up flooding the ranch with the Orbitornami, and Jack and Clay end up in a showdown. I think? The challenge is to find the Eye of Hanabi in a giant haystack, and I really like the art style and concept of the showdown. They give a huge sense of scale to the haystacks and environment, but I also love the painterly texture of it all. Clay's dad shouts commands at him the whole time, and Clay finally confronts his father, telling him to believe in him and to let him do things his own way. Clay lassos Jack and ends up winning the showdown Kung Fu cowboy style, leading to Clay's dad realizing Clay may have been a man this whole time, allowing him to go back to the temple. I like the episode, and I think it's nice character development for Clay, and actually gives him a challenge to overcome with his wit, unlike before, where Clay just kinda won without any kind of dilemma present. I was a little disappointed the ranch work didn't really amount to anything, like I thought it would have been kinda cool if they learned a technique or a moral lesson from herding the cows or something, but it ends up being a little pointless, but more importantly, kinda boring. But again, the episode has a cool setting, I love the cowboy outfits and style, and this episode makes me appreciate Clay even more. Episode 11 starts with the gang training as a team, but their bickering causes them all to fail. This part kinda looks like that one Mario Party minigame. Now, this episode gets kinda crazy because Dojo and Wuya sense 4 Shengon Wu at the same time. The 4 apprentices split up to get the Shengon Wu, so I'll try to keep these fights as separate as I can. Now, on the villain side, along with Jack, we have the Imposter Robot, Tabimura, the Sumo Ninja, and Katnape, which is a pretty cool callback to have them all here. Kimiko faces off against Katnape in the swamp where they have hovercrafts, and the showdown is for the Lotus Twister, a Shengon Wu that can turn your limbs into stretchy rubber, kinda like that other show on the same network about the stretchy rubber guy. Katnape calls Kimiko's cell phone, which alerts the gators in the swamp, stranding Kimiko and allowing Katnape to win the showdown, while also catching Kimiko in a net. Next up, we have Raimundo facing off against the Imposter Robot for the Longi Kite, which allows you to sail through the air. Rai sees a woman on the beach and pogs, but it turns out to be the imposter. As they fall into the water, the robot turns into an octopus and flings Raimundo away, handing him the owl. Next, Clay fights Tabimura for the Tongue Sai Ping, which allows the user to talk to animals. Tabimura throws fish at Clay, which attracts seals, cracking the ice and freezing Clay, giving Tabimura the win. Finally, we have Omi versus Jack. Here they fight for the Sonchi lamp, which allows the user to unite their energy with others. For some reason, this fight is in black and white and at like 6 frames per second, and I have no idea why. Like, maybe it was for time or budget reasons, since this is a pretty ambitious episode with tons of scenes and fights and everything, but I don't know if it actually made the production more efficient or if it was just a weird stylistic choice. They race for the Shengon Wu while carrying a glass of water they can't spill, and Omi wins by pouring the water into his mouth and running to the Shengon Wu. But like, that's cheating, he literally spilled it out the glass, but at least he pours it back in, I guess. So Omi returns to the temple, only to realize all his friends lost, and he needs to rescue them from Jack's evil lair. Omi breaks in and uses the Sonchi Lantern to combine his chi with the other dragon warriors, allowing Omi to wield their elemental powers. Omi handily defeats all the villains and gets into one last showdown with Jack.
Don't make me bust you up, little man.
Overall, it's a fine episode, but it's definitely on the lower half of Season 1 for me. The Sonchi Lantern is a cool Shengon Wu, and its power thematically fits well with the episode. I just feel like they don't really resolve anything. Like, they start the episode all fighting and bickering, 3 of them get taken away, and Omi saves them. Like, even if they all made up or apologized, causing the Shengon Wu to activate, it might have been a little more satisfying. But I guess you can make the argument their issues were resolved because of Omi's unconditional support for his friends. Overall, I think the episode is really cool and gives us so many locations and fights, but I tend to gravitate towards the episodes with a little more emotion and development. Episode 12. Jack starts episode 12 by making a spreadsheet of who has every Shengon Wu so far, and I gotta say, this is really funny to see as someone trying to keep track of the wins and losses so far. Omi and Jack have a showdown over the Heart of Jung, and the challenge is to collect as many acorns as possible, which is like my least favorite showdown of the season. But the fall-autumn aesthetic is kinda cool, so this is another win for Jack and another loss for Omi. Omi's sad, but Master Feng tells him losing a Shengon Wu isn't the end of the world. When he finds out it was the Heart of Jung, Master Feng turns pale, saying it's the end of the world. Which is pretty funny, but it hits hard being the first time in the whole show we see Master Feng show emotion like this, so you know the stakes are high. Jack and Wuya use the Shengon Wu to revive the ancient warrior named Mala Mala Jung, who will inevitably conquer the temple. Now that she has a powerful ally, Wuya abandons Jack, and Master Feng advises the dragon warriors to take all the Shengon Wu and hide up in the mountains, in order to prevent the ancient warrior from becoming even stronger. This rubs Raimundo the wrong way, who wants to stay and fight, and we start to see more of Raimundo's rebellious side here. Ultimately, he obliges, and we get to see Master Feng fight Mala Mala Jung, and it's pretty cool to see, especially since we've never seen Master Feng fight so far. While this is happening, the warriors are hiding in the cave, but can't find Raimundo since he's escaped back to the temple, where he loses the Sword of the Storm, making Mala Mala Jung even more powerful. To make matters worse, Wuya reads Raimundo's mind and finds the location of the other warriors hiding in the cave, creating like the worst case scenario ever. Remember that Shengon Wu, the serpent's tail, that allows the user to travel through solid objects? Do you also remember how the golden tiger claws were put into the center of the earth? Well, Omi uses the serpent's tail to travel through the earth's core, grab the golden tiger claws, teleport inside Mala Mala Jung, and destroy him. It's a lot to take in, but it's a really cool concept, and I love the callback to previous episodes. When the golden tiger claws claws were put in the Earth's core, I kinda just assumed that they'd be melted. Like, is the Earth's core made out of cheese in this universe or something? How are they getting there without burning? The episode ends, not with a celebration, but a bittersweet reflection of the recent events. Omi, Kimiko, and Clay have been promoted to Xiaolin apprentices, but Raimundo isn't, as he's punished for not listening to instructions and pushing them to the brink of destruction. Raimundo storms out of the temple, leading us to the finale of Season 1. Episode 13 starts with Jack creating a Shengon Wu tracker so he doesn't have to rely on Wuya's unfaithful ass anymore. And now that he can find the Shengon Wu himself, Wuya is all but useless. The 3 Xiaolin apprentices, that being everyone but Raimundo, have new powers where they can combine their elemental powers with Shengon Wu, which is really cool because most of the time so far we've seen the warriors shout their element and then just kick a robot or something. Like, watch this clip and tell me where you see water involved. So this is a nice touch in progression of their powers. Upset, Raimundo takes the tiger claws and opens a portal back to Rio. Wuya preys on the vulnerable Raimundo, promising him a life of luxury if he joins the dark side and stuff. This proposal is interrupted by a new Shengon Wu activating, the reversing mirror, which has the power to reverse the effect of any Shengon Wu. Raimundo ends up in a showdown against Jack, where the first person to get caught in the light of this lighthouse loses. The golden tiger claws remain as one of the most overpowered Shengon Wu, allowing Raimundo to casually push Jack into the light and win the reversing mirror. Raimundo leaves the showdown with Wuya, but makes one last stop at the temple to steal the serpent's tail. And although he's hesitant, Raimundo obliges with the promise of getting his own soccer team someday. Raimundo takes on the 3 apprentices and wins single-handedly, showing off his immense power and potential. They wonder why he only took the serpent's tail and no other Shengon Wu, but it all becomes pretty clear when they realize the serpent's tail turns something solid ghostly. So when you combine that with the reversing mirror, you can make something ghostly solid, like Wuya. So the season ends with Wuya, the ancient evil, being brought back to her original form, and I think it's a great spot to end one of my favorite seasons of a continuous plot cartoon from the early 2000s. There's so many interesting plot points with Raimundo's betrayal, Wuya's new power, and the new alliances taking place, because we now have 3 different parties fighting for Shengon Wu. That being Raimundo and Wuya, Jack Spicer and his robots, and the 3 Xiaolin apprentices. So let's take a look at the final results of who won and lost the most. Now, of the 5 main characters, coming in last place is Kimiko. Yay! Kimiko's only win throughout the season is in the episode where she's told she's not good enough because she's a girl, with her only other win being a Shengon Wu she finds in the water, which is debatable as a win in the first place. 4th place is pretty surprising to me. With 3 wins and 6 losses, we have Raimundo, which is funny since he's always considered one of the strongest warriors and even beats the other 3 by himself at the end of the season. In our middle spot, at 7 wins and 11 losses, is Jack Spicer. Funnily enough, 7 wins is tied for the most wins this season, but it makes sense he has the most losses too, since he's in just about every showdown. The show is so much more interesting because he wins a lot, and it keeps me invested in every showdown. So now that we're down to the final 2, Clay and Omi, in 2nd place is Clay at 4 wins and 5 losses. Clay may be the funniest character in the show, and his showdowns are really entertaining because of how clever and crafty he is. But this leaves only one more spot. Coming in 1st place at 1-0 is Dojo! Yeah! Congratulations! Yeah, Omi takes the top spot at 7-7, which might seem obvious, but I'm surprised he only has a 50% win rate and not higher. But I'm also kind of surprised another character with less showdowns didn't squeak by with a higher win rate. But now that I think about it, it's kind of crazy that the highest win rate is 50%, like no one has a positive record. If we quickly examine the side characters throughout the season, Katnape has the most wins at 3 wins, 2 losses, but Jermaine and Dojo are both 1-0. Granted, these records could come out a little differently depending on what you count as a win and a loss, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Did your predictions come true? Or let me know who your favorite character is. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next week. Alright, bye!